You're not depressed. You're not broken. And you're certainly not the only one who has woken up, stared at the ceiling, and felt absolutely nothing toward the life you spent years building. That crushing emptiness you're mistaking for a crisis? That is the sound of the floor being ripped out from under the old version of you, so that a new foundation can be poured. If you've been terrified by your own apathy lately, if the things that used to light a fire in your chest now feel like ash in your mouth, do not click away, because the next half hour is going to reframe every ounce of that fear into the most precise, undeniable evidence that you are not falling apart. You are just days away from becoming someone you don't yet have the eyes to see. Welcome back. I'm Shehzad Hussain. And today, we are stepping directly into the quiet eye of the storm. Specifically, the storm that rages silently inside when all the noise of the outside world suddenly goes mute. There is a specific, terrifying quiet that arrives not at the end of a long struggle, but right before the breakthrough. It's the psychological equivalent of being in a vehicle that has been climbing a steep grade in low gear, engine roaring, and then suddenly the road flattens out and you shift into neutral. The engine goes silent, the vibration stops, and for a moment, you mistake the peace for mechanical failure. Most people, especially those of us driven by a deep need to understand the architecture of the self, interpret this silence as a catastrophic loss of identity. We say things like, "I don't know who I am anymore," or "Nothing feels real," or the most dangerous one of all, "What's the point?" But what if the point is the nothingness? What if the void isn't a grave, but a doorway? What if this heavy gray blanket of apathy is actually the most sophisticated tool your unconscious mind possesses for dismantling an identity that has become too small for the soul that wears it? I want you to consider a strange, slightly uncomfortable analogy. Think of your consciousness as a house you have lived in your entire life. You know where every creaky floorboard is. You know exactly how hard you have to push the front door to make it latch. There is a specific smell in the basement and a specific way the light hits the kitchen table at 4 p.m. That house is your identity. It is built from the lumber of your memories, the bricks of your beliefs, and the mortar of your reactions. It's comfortable. Even when it's painful, it's familiar pain. And the psyche, like a stubborn tenant with a lease on reality, will do almost anything to stay inside a familiar house, even if the roof is leaking toxic sludge and the foundation is cracking. Then, something shifts. Maybe it's a life event. Maybe it's a single piercing conversation. Or maybe, as Carl Jung suggested, it's simply the inner clock of the self ticking over to a new hour. And the order comes down from the architect of your own unconscious. The foundation is compromised. We cannot renovate. We must demolish. But here is the part no one talks about. Demolition is silent. It is not the explosion you see in cinema. It is the slow, quiet removal of the support beams. And before the walls come down, there is this moment, this liminal space. You are standing in your living room, but the furniture is gone. The pictures are off the wall. The color is stripped. You are standing in the exact same spatial coordinates, but the meaning has been vacuumed out of the room. You are surrounded by the ghosts of old conversations and the dust of former passions. This is the flatline. This is the numb, gray fog you've been walking through. You pick up your guitar, the instrument that used to be the only thing that made sense in high school, and you strum a chord. Nothing. You hear the frequency, the vibration of the string, but the resonance in your chest is absent. It sounds like a child's toy. You look at the person you love, and you logically know you love them. But the feeling of love is a memory, not a present tense sensation. You're touching the world through a thick layer of sterile surgical gauze. Is this familiar? Are you there right now? Have you been walking around with this strange hollow pressure behind your eyes, wondering if you've permanently lost the ability to care? If you're nodding, I need you to stop pathologizing this immediately. The modern world, with its pharmaceutical advertisements and quick-fix therapy applications, has taught us one singular, crushing lesson. Feeling nothing skorks sickness. But that is a half-truth that has robbed millions of a sacred, internal initiation. There is a massive difference between clinical depression and psychic quarantine. Clinical depression is a weight. It is a heaviness that pins you to the mattress like a lead blanket. It is a loop of negative rumination. It says, I am worthless. I am a burden. The world is gray because it has always been gray and always will be gray. Depression has a specific downward velocity. It drags you toward the floor. It makes the simple act of standing up feel like climbing a mountain in wet sand. Psychic quarantine is different. Psychic quarantine is emptiness. It is not heavy. It is hollow. It is the absence of the loop. It says, I am not worthless. I am just not here. The world is quiet because something is about to happen that requires all my bandwidth. Think of it like updating the operating system on a very powerful computer. When the update begins, the screen goes dark. The fan might stop spinning. For 10 or 20 seconds, the machine looks completely dead. A novice technician panics and unplugs it, ruining the update, corrupting the system. An expert technician knows the lights are off because the energy is being diverted to the root code. Do not interrupt power. You, right now, are the novice technician panicking over the black screen. You are reaching for the power cord, ready to shock yourself back into a fake sense of normalcy. But the screen isn't broken. It's just that the part of the brain that generates the pretty desktop wallpaper of your daily life, the persona, has been temporarily shut down so the deeper self can run a diagnostic. Let's go deeper. Why does it have to feel like death? Why can't the upgrade happen while we're awake and feeling happy? Why must the descent into the underworld be so cold and so silent? Because the structure that is being dissolved is the very structure through which you experience happiness. You cannot use the old tool to build the new temple. The tool must be reforged in the dark. We operate on what Jung called the persona. It's the mask. It's the Shehzad who makes videos about psychology. It's the you who is a good parent, a reliable employee, a funny friend. That mask isn't fake. It's necessary. It's how we interface with the collective. But over time, that mask becomes so thick, so rigid, so calcified by expectation, that we start to think the mask is our actual face. When a major shift in consciousness is required, usually because you've outgrown your current mask, the psyche cannot just politely ask the mask to step aside. The mask is the ego. The ego doesn't step aside. It fights to the death with the desperation of a drowning man. So, the unconscious uses a different tactic. It cuts the power supply. It removes the fuel. It stops the flow of emotional energy to the mask. And what is the mask without energy? A hollow shell. A lifeless prop. That's why your hobbies feel hollow, because the you who loved that hobby was a component of the old operating system. That version of you is in the process of being archived. You're trying to run a file from 2015 on a 2026 architecture. It won't execute. The code is incompatible. The driver is missing. This is why you feel like an alien in your own bedroom. This is why the conversations you used to crave now feel like a tax audit. You are not losing your mind. You are losing the noise of a false self. I want to share a specific type of imagery with you to help navigate this. Imagine you are deep underwater, not drowning, just suspended. You're in that zone of the ocean where light from the surface no longer penetrates. It's called the aphotic zone. Eternal midnight. No fish, no sound, just the immense, crushing pressure of the deep. If you panic down there, you die. You burn oxygen. You thrash. You swim in a direction you think is up, But in the dark, your inner ear lies to you, and you swim sideways, or worse, straight down into the abyss. This is the exact moment most people break. This is the moment they reach for the phone to doom scroll. They reach for the bottle. They reach for the toxic relationship. They reach for anything that makes noise, just to prove they aren't alone in the dark. But the noise is the enemy of the shift. The process you are undergoing requires absolute stillness. When you stop thrashing, two miraculous things happen. First, your buoyancy stabilizes. You stop sinking. You just float. You realize the pressure isn't crushing you, it's holding you. It is the hand of the self pressing you down just enough so you don't float back to the surface too soon, where the old thin air of the persona would suffocate you in a different way. Second, and this is crucial, your eyes begin to adjust, not to the light above, because there is none, but to the dark, and as your pupils dilate to their absolute maximum aperture, you begin to see something you could not see when you were thrashing around. Bioluminescence. Life. Light that is generated from within. You start to see the faint electric blue outline of your own shadow, the things you repressed, the anger you swallowed at work, the art you were too scared to make because someone called it weird when you were 12, the truth you were too polite to speak. Down here, in the silent void of the flatline, these creatures of the deep psyche rise to meet you. They are not monsters. They are the exiled parts of you coming home, because the noisy, judgmental party upstairs has finally quieted down. This is the shadow work everyone talks about on social media, with fancy graphics and journal prompts. But real shadow work isn't writing down your flaws in a leather notebook with a cup of expensive tea. Real shadow work is enduring the cold, silent terror of the deep ocean and realizing you can breathe underwater. It's not a weekend workshop. It's a wintering of the soul. You aren't clearing space for a new hobby. You aren't clearing space for a new relationship or a new job. You are clearing space for a new mode of perception. Let me ask you a question that might sting a little. When was the last time you did something only for the sake of doing it? Not for the Instagram story. Not for the career advancement. Not for the approval of the voice in your head that sounds exactly like your father, mother, or that boss who fired you 5 years ago. Can't remember? That's because the old operating system ran on the fuel of external validation. It was a machine designed to produce outcomes. And like any machine, when it stops producing, it feels worthless. This flatline period is the factory shutdown. The conveyor belt of shoulds and musts has ground to a halt, and in the silence of the factory floor, you realize you are not the machine. You are the inventor standing next to the machine. What does the inventor do when the old machine breaks down? Does he spend his days weeping, trying to crank the rusted gears with his bare hands, slicing his palms open on the old metal? Does he scream at the silent engine, demanding it turn over? Or does he sit down, pick up a pencil, and start sketching the blueprint for the next machine? That blueprint is being drawn right now. But you can't see it because you're too busy staring at the broken machine. You're too busy grieving the loss of the noise. I want you to listen closely to this next part. This is the signal in the noise. The feeling of I don't care anymore is often a sign of depression. But the observation of, oh, look at that. I don't care about that thing I used to care about. How curious. That is not depression. That is witness consciousness. There is a part of you that is aware of the numbness. The numbness is happening to someone, and that someone is the old you. The one who is aware of it, that's the new you. That's the silent watcher. That's the consciousness that is doing the upgrading. As long as you are noticing the emptiness, you are not empty. Emptiness cannot observe emptiness. It takes a presence to notice an absence. You are not the void. You are the light shining into the void. This is the Jungian integration that we reference so often. It's the moment the ego stops trying to be the captain of the ship and accepts its role as the lookout in the crow's nest. The ship is being steered by something deeper, the self. And the self has taken the helm and turned off the engines. Not because we are lost at sea, but because we have arrived at the destination, and the captain is looking for a good spot to drop anchor. Let's pause here and examine this metaphor of the self more closely, because it holds the key to surviving this flatline with your sanity intact. Jung spoke extensively about the tension between the ego and the self. The ego is the center of your conscious awareness. It's the voice that says, I think or I want. But the self is the totality. It is the blueprint of your entire being, both conscious and unconscious. It is the architect we mentioned earlier. When the self decides that the ego's construction project, your current life structure, is no longer viable, it issues a stop work order. That stop work order feels like death because the ego is terrified of being demoted. It thinks it's getting fired. But it's not. It's just being asked to take a seat in the waiting room while the real work gets done. This is why the flatline is so disorienting. You are used to being the driver. Now you're in the back seat, and the car is moving through a tunnel with no lights. You can't see the road. You can't touch the steering wheel. All you can do is trust that whoever is driving knows the way out. And that is the hardest thing for a modern, rational mind to do, to trust the invisible. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're listening to this, and a small, cynical part of you is saying, this is just a fancy way of excusing laziness or burnout. And I want to address that head on, because the cynic inside you is actually a guardian. It's a protector that doesn't want you to be fooled. But let's look at the physical evidence. This is not just spiritual woo-woo. There is a neurobiological basis for this flatline. When the brain is preparing for a major cognitive shift, what neuroscientists call a phase transition in neural networks, there is a measurable period of decreased activity in the default mode network. The DMM is the part of your brain that chatters constantly about you. It's the voice of the self-referential ego. I need to do this. I should have done that. What do they think of me? Right before a breakthrough, the DMM goes quiet. It's like the brain is putting the ego to sleep so it can rearrange the furniture. This is why meditation feels like nothing for the first 10 minutes. You're just sitting there, waiting for the chatter to stop. And when it does, you don't suddenly feel ecstatic. You feel blank. And that blankness is precisely the fertile ground where new neural connections are being formed. So when you feel like you're in a fog and you can't access your old motivation, it's not because you're weak. It's because your brain is literally offline for maintenance. It is a biological, measurable, and necessary process. But there is a danger in this phase, and the danger is misinterpretation. Because the void is so uncomfortable, the ego tries to fill it with the nearest available narrative. And for most of us, the nearest available narrative is a negative one. I'm a loser. I'm wasting my life. I've lost my edge. The ego would rather you believe a painful story about being a failure than admit that it simply isn't in control anymore. This is where you must become a detective of your own interior. Are you feeling the heavy, sinking weight of shame? Or are you feeling the light, hollow echo of an empty room? Shame is a burning coal. Emptiness is just space. Can you trust the space? Can you let the room be empty without rushing to fill it with old, dusty furniture from the garage? This brings us to the practical navigation of this terrain. I've hinted at it, but let's lay out the map with absolute clarity. How do you survive the flatline without losing your job, your partner, or the thread of your daily life? First principle, the radical permission to be boring. When you are in the void, you do not have the energy for your usual performance. And that is the gift. The void is forcing you to drop the act. But society tells you, that you must perform. You must be on. This creates a friction that causes immense suffering. Give yourself permission to be the most boring version of yourself you have ever been. Cancel the plans that make you want to cry just thinking about them. Not because you're depressed, but because you are conserving bandwidth for the internal construction project. Eat the same meal 3 days in a row, because deciding what to eat uses too much RAM. Wear the same gray hoodie. Stare at the wall. This is not apathy. This is strategic conservation. By pulling energy away from the external performance, you are redirecting it to the internal renovation. You are plugging the power cable directly into the unconscious. Second principle, the embrace of the mundane object. Earlier I mentioned washing dishes and sorting nuts. Let's go deeper into this. Why does this work? Because when you are in the flat line, your connection to abstract meaning is severed. The word passion means nothing. The word purpose feels like a cruel joke. So you cannot connect with the abstract. You can only connect with the concrete. The texture of the wood grain on the table. The weight of a single key in your palm. The sound of the refrigerator compressor clicking off. Focusing on these micro-sensations does two things. First, it anchors you in the present moment, which is the only place the self is currently operating. Second, it proves to the psyche that you can survive without the narrative. You can just be with a spoon. And if you can be with a spoon, you can be with the void. Third principle, the guarding of the threshold. This is perhaps the most important rule for the duration of this quiet season. Do not let anyone drag you back to the surface before you are ready. When people around you, especially those who benefit from the old performing version of you, sense that you are retreating, they will panic. They will try to cheer you up. They will say things like, "Come on. Let's go out. You just need to get out of your head." They mean well, but they are trying to rescue the old statue from the demolition site. They are trying to glue the broken marble back together. You must protect the silence. You do not need to explain Jungian psychology to them. You simply say, "I'm in a quiet season. I'm okay. I just need to be still for a while." And then you hold that boundary with the force of a concrete wall. Because every time you let someone pull you out into a noisy, stimulating environment just to make them feel better about your state, you extend the construction timeline by another week. Fourth principle, the documentation of the strange. I touched on this earlier, the blue looking bluer. But I want you to treat this like a field journal from a new planet. Because that's what it is. The new consciousness that is being built will perceive reality differently. You will start noticing things that you were blind to before. Maybe it's a specific type of silence between car horns. Maybe it's the way a shadow moves across the floor. These are not distractions. These are previews. These are the first glimpses of the new operating system's user interface. Write them down. Not for a social media post. Not for a therapist. Just for the record. Just to prove to the future integrated version of you that there was a trail of breadcrumbs leading out of the dark wood. Fifth principle, the refusal to force the bloom. There will come a moment, usually after a few weeks or months of this gray fog, where you feel a tiny flicker, a small, almost imperceptible impulse. Maybe I'll draw something. Or, I wonder what the park looks like right now. Do not attack that impulse. Do not turn it into a project. Do not say, "Finally, I'm back. I'm going to draw for an hour every day and become a great artist." No, that's the old, outcome-obsessed ego trying to hijack the new energy. Treat that tiny impulse like a baby deer stepping out of the forest. If you run at it screaming with joy and expectation, you will scare it back into the trees for another 6 months. You must sit very still. You must let it come to you. You draw for 3 minutes. You walk to the park and turn right back around. You prove to the new self that you will not exploit it. You will not use it for content. You will not use it for validation. This is the final test of the flatline, the test of gentleness. I want to share one final expanded image with you. Because we've talked about statues falling and shoots growing. But let's look at the actual moment of return. Imagine a diver, not a scuba diver with tanks and masks, a free diver, someone who holds their breath and goes deep into the blue silence. They leave the noise of the surface, the waves, the wind, the voices of the people on the boat. They descend into the quiet. The pressure mounts. The light fades to that deep twilight blue. And then they stop. They hang there, suspended. For a long, long moment, they are nowhere. They are just a heartbeat in the deep. The people on the boat are getting nervous. They are looking at their watches. They are scanning the surface, wondering if something has gone terribly wrong. But the diver is fine. The diver is not dead. The diver is simply at the bottom of the descent, gathering the pearl. And then, without warning, the diver turns. The feet push off the sandy bottom. The ascent begins. But here is the crucial detail. The diver does not shoot to the surface like a rocket. The ascent is slow, controlled, bubbles streaming from the nose in a steady, calm rhythm. Because coming up too fast will kill you. The bends. Decompression sickness. The return from the flatline is exactly the same. You have been deep in the aphotic zone of the psyche. You have seen the bioluminescence of your own shadow. You have gathered the pearl of a new self-concept. If you try to rush back to the surface of normal life too quickly, you will get the psychological bends. You will become overwhelmed by the noise. You will reject the pearl because the pressure change is too violent. You must surface slowly. You must re-enter the world of light and sound one small wave at a time. You must allow the new consciousness to adjust to the atmosphere of the old world. And when you finally break the surface, gasping for air, you will not be the person who jumped in. You will be someone who knows how deep the ocean goes. And you will never again mistake the surface for the whole of reality. Thank you for spending this time in the quiet with me. If this resonated, or if you recognize the signs of your own deep water navigation, I'd invite you to sit with this. Don't just click the next video. Let the silence hang for a moment. See if you can hear the blueprint being drawn.